this knowledge area, the content is pretty straightforward. The execution is not so straightforward most of the time. But before we hit this knowledge area, do you guys have any questions about what we've covered so far? I'm sure you will over time. All right. So elicitation and collaboration. Getting this right. If we don't get this right, this is where this knowledge area is very critical, because if we don't elicit the right information, or we don't get good collaboration and people aren't working well together, then we can have some poor results. And this is not my story. I will be telling you my stories throughout. So what is elicitation? So here's difference. How many of you, unmuting yourself, have come to understand the difference between gathering and elicitation, and gathering has become a pet peeve of yours? Unmute if gathering is a pet peeve. Okay, not very many of you. That's interesting. So in the BABOK, it is not gathering. It is elicitation. Gathering implies that the requirements that you need are, I think it's going to become a pet peeve after I'm done. It might be when I tell you the perspective that the IIBA has on it and that I have on it. So gathering, we gather things that are laying around, right? We gather them up. That means they're readily visible. They're already there. I can see it. I just pick it up. The definition of elicitation is that you have to draw it forth. So if I go to your BABOK, it should actually specify that for you. Drawing forth from stakeholders or other sources, meaning it's not just sitting there for the taking. There's work to be done to get it. So if I look at the elicitation definition, to draw or bring out or forth, educe, evoke, to elicit the truth, to elicit a response. If I change that to gathering, an assembly or okay, so that's not helpful. Take in from scattered places or sources, pick up from the ground or surface, collect as a harvest. So it's about the fact that it's there. You can see it, you pull it together. Elicitation is more direct effort and requires more skill. So what you guys do, unless all you're doing is having a would you like fries with that mentality with your business analysis, this is would you like fries with that? I'm just going to take what you give me. I'm not going to challenge it. I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to ask you clarifying questions. I'm just going to take what you have to give me and I'm going to go forward. Or are you going to elicit understanding from people by asking good questions, challenging the status quo, challenging perspectives and things like that? If you're a really good business analyst, you're doing this right here. I used to, one of the things I would do with teams of business analysts that I managed, I would encourage them to elicit. And if someone insists that what they want is what they want, you still don't just gather that from them. You evaluate that, identify the risks, and let them own those risks, because you don't gather, you elicit. So, okay. What is manage? Create, update, delete, import, export. Okay, I'm sorry guys, I do not know what these are. Okay, so when we're talking about elicitation, we want to think about the fact that there might be a small group of people that we overlook very easily. Okay, there might be is elicitation the same thing as discovering? I don't know if I would call it that. because elicitation is where you are pulling something out of something else. Discovering is where you're finding something. So discovering could be part of elicitation, but so like if you, I don't know, let's look at something. Find something unexpectedly or in the course of a search. So in the course of a search would apply. Hopefully it's not unexpectedly. Be the first to find or observe something, perceive the attractions for the first time. So I don't know if I would use the word discover. Elicitation implies more purposeful, direct attempt to pull something out of something. And that's why they use the word elicit, if that makes any sense. I don't know if you tried to do something like no, they just compare gathering to elicitation. I'm not sure. Elicitation versus discovery. That might be an interesting thing to read. We don't have time right now, but I don't know what this says, but I can do this for you if you're curious. Check it out. All right, let's get back to the stuff that you're going to be tested on. Okay. Another thing that gathering causes is when I'm looking for stuff that's obvious, that's what gathering is. I am looking for the obvious stuff, which means I might miss a small user base. Now, that small user base could have greatly impactful requirements. So if I'm just gathering, I'm missing stuff. I want to be thoughtful in this. I want to be trying to find things in places that aren't normally found. That might be more discovery. And then when I find those resources, now I need to elicit information from them in order to get what we really need to get done. So this is where we're trying to get complete requirements. And I would say drawing forth or pulling out complete requirements as opposed to collecting is the same thing as gathering. And we're doing it from all kinds of places. It's not just people. Most of us, when we think about elicitation and stuff like that, we think about people. You elicit from documents. You elicit from systems. You elicit from all kinds of things. Okay? So it's important to realize that elicitation is not dependent on a single source. It's just everything that you try to understand or pull information from, that's elicitation. So collaboration. This is a much different thing. Collaboration is when when multiple people work together towards a common goal. That's not always the easiest thing to have happen. It is the most complicated thing that we do often, because getting people to play nice together when they're stressed or they don't want to deal with it or they don't like each other. And you don't have a choice. We have to figure out how we can get them to work together so that we can accomplish this goal that the organization has set. So the other thing to keep in mind, and this is very, very similar to others, but this knowledge area specifically layers or lays on top of most of the others, right? Elicitation and collaboration is done while I'm doing strategy analysis. I'm doing that while I'm doing requirements analysis and design. I dabble in elicitation and collaboration. I'm doing it while I'm doing solution evaluation. So elicitation and collaboration happens a lot. It's something that you do a lot of. So we're going to talk, the first three up top, those are going to feel like I'm talking about how do you plan a meeting. But I mean, it's really similar. And then we're going to talk about communicating BA information and then the managing stakeholder collaboration. Okay. So things to watch for, we're going to look for potential value and supporting materials. We're going to look for those two terms throughout these slide decks. Pay close attention to them. They can help you on your test. Okay, so with that being said, there wasn't a lot of content there. It was just an introduction. So I'm not going to pause here. I'm going to get moving into the first task, which is the most important stuff for us to cover for your test. Okay, prepare. This, again, it's going to feel a lot like we're talking about how to prepare for a meeting. So this should be pretty straightforward for you guys. Why should we prepare? Because if we don't prepare, then we're not going to have a good result. We're not going to get the right people in the room. We're not going to use the right tools for those people. And it's just going to be a disaster, and we're going to walk away without having a good result. And now everyone has a negative taste in their mouth for the change, and they're going to be even harder to win over next time. So we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about understanding what we're trying to elicit, the different kind of techniques we could use for what we're trying to elicit, as well as the people involved. Make sure that we've got the right things available to us to execute well, and get supporting material. Okay. And then ideally we prepare the stakeholders so they know what they're getting in for. Okay. So when we're talking about what techniques do I want to use, I'm going to minimize this. If you guys start wanting to chat, you might have to tell me, because I'm trying to get that out of my way. Okay. Elicitation techniques depend on a lot of things. Okay. So the business domain, depending on the kind of function they have. Like if you're working in an industry structure of, if you're working for a PR and marketing firm, you might choose techniques very different than if you were working with an education group or oil and gas or something like that. The functional domain is an even bigger impact, right? So when you're talking about, if I'm going to work with a group of accountants, again, like I said before, I'm going to be selective on my elicitation approach, because some elicitation approaches, if all I have is a room full of introverts, some elicitation results will cause that group to totally shut down on me. They won't want to engage. So I'm going to think about that. The culture of the organization. Some organizations don't tolerate you having big gatherings. What if you need a big gathering? What are you going to do? Right? So thinking about the culture, maybe your culture really supports you getting creative and colorful. Well, that gives you a lot of freedom for your techniques. You're going to think about that. Do you have a lot of people spread out everywhere, or are you all central? Like workshops are more difficult if people are spread out, but not impossible. There is a lot of value for being in the room with people, right? Because they can't mute you. They can't turn off their camera. You have a chance to watch their body language. You can tell if you're losing them. You can tell if they're kind of shrinking into themselves and not wanting to work with the group because they're uncomfortable and insecure. There's so many things that are important for in-person stuff. Now, in today's world, with what you're dealing with, you can still accomplish that, but you can set a requirement and expectation for the group that we're going to turn on our video cameras. Now, that's harder for you as the analyst to be able to keep track of everyone's body language. In that case, you might want to have an assistant for facilitation that can bring to your attention if you're losing people. Let's take out the current crazy thing this world is dealing with right now and assume we are where we were 6 months ago, and you have people all over the world. Some elicitation sessions are going to be things that you're going to still be okay. I mean, it's ideal to have people in the room, but it's not critical. When you're very early in a project and you know that these people don't get along well, and you're trying to get a really important project going that's going to be painful and going to take a while. I actually got a very large international organization to bring people in from, where was it? It's from Ireland, Australia, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Florida, and I got them all brought to Oklahoma. That was surprising to get some of those people to come to Oklahoma, but that was very, very important. Those people were not getting along. There was some conflict in the group. By the time we were done, they were all on the same page. They were getting it. They were working together, and they were enjoying it. Now, if I hadn't have been able to get them all in the room, they would have not built the same level of relationship, and everything else would have been more difficult. So in an ideal world, you have an organization that supports and respects you and what you represent and trusts your recommendations and gives you opportunity to do remote versus in person when appropriate. What am I hoping to come out of this? If I'm going to be expected to produce current state process models, I know I need to do an elicitation technique that draws forth the process for current state, right? Who's involved? Again, understand. What mix of introverts, extroverts, personalities, relationships do I have in the room, and what would be appropriate to get them out of their little worlds and get them to work together with me? What other activities am I going to be doing? If I know that I need to go, let's say that I ultimately need to get a prioritized list of requirements, but we haven't even started. Well, I know that later I'm going to have a prioritization session, which means in the sessions that lead up to it, I need to be thinking about techniques that help me get the information I need to do the other elicitation activities later. So I need to think about that. This is where we need to think big picture. When I'm trying to figure out what I need to do, I need to know where we're going, because that could determine who I involve, what kind of stuff do we need to talk about, what does that mean, what kind of techniques are appropriate to get us where we're going ultimately. I need to be able to think about that. Where am I going to get my information? Well, elicitation doesn't just have to be people in workshops. Maybe my source, but maybe before I hit that workshop, I'm going to do some other elicitation. I'm going to look at current documents. I'm going to access current systems. I'm going to do stuff like that and get all of those pieces of information before I engage others. My statement is to my stakeholders is always, if anyone's time is going to be wasted, it will be mine, not yours. I would rather spend some time stumbling through information so that when I come to you and I take you away from your productive environment where you're generating or supporting revenue, I want that to be as efficient as possible, right? So I'm going to look at all kinds of other sources before I tackle people. And sometimes it feels like I'm tackling people. And what approach are we taking? Are we doing adaptive? Are we doing predictive? Are we doing a blend? If I'm doing predictive, I'm going to probably try to, I'm going to be very methodical about it, right? I'm going to be a lot more structured. If we're in a more adaptive environment, I'm probably going to start with certain types of techniques and lead to others that are more iterative and more engaging and more directly collaborative, as opposed to what I would do if I was just trying to dot every I and cross every T. So knowing what my approach to change is going to impact that. Also, as I go through the life cycle of a specific change initiative, and let's say I'm done with strategy analysis and we've picked, so if I'm trying to get the requirements for the strategy and for the long-term solution selection, I'm going to do different kinds of elicitation than I will if we've selected the vendor solution and now I know the solution we're going to do and I need to get specific information that will help us with implementing that specific solution. I'm going to do slightly different techniques, right? So knowing and thinking about all of those things is going to drive what I should do. But there's one caveat. There is a possibility that the business analyst involved doesn't have the right skill set for certain types of elicitation that would be most appropriate. So you might have to shift your expectation of techniques while that business analyst is building the skill, or provide them training, or give them a mentor that can help them with those elicitation techniques. So that's something else that has to be considered. Not just what do we need to do and why and with who, but what skills does this business analyst have to execute what we need to have accomplished, right? So we got to think about those things. Okay, so this is just a quick little flow about what kind of techniques should I do. Do I have any documents available? Yes. Okay, I'm going to do document analysis. Even if it's, so, okay, this is not perfect. If I said yes, I would still go and I would still say, am I looking for NFRs, and do a checklist. And I've got a lot of diamonds that don't even have any, can be observed. I'm assuming this is a yes with observation. Okay, I got to make a note. This needs to be tweaked. Sorry. So going through, thinking about all of the things. So the idea to take away from this, I think, would be that you need to think about all the different things that would be impactful in the specific change that you're talking about. If you're talking about people's behaviors, you may not have a lot of documents. You may need to do more observation, right? So you're going to ask yourself, does this change possibly have other documentation associated with it that I consume? If the answer is yes, I'm going to look at that. Okay, am I talking about a process that's, that is currently in place? Yes. Okay, great. I'm going to go watch it. And there's a lot more to observation. You got to decide, is it passive? Is it active? So there are all kinds of things that you could do there. is it something that I need to have people collaborating in a group on, or am I going to do a one-on-one thing? Okay, if it's a group, I'm going to do a workshop. If it's one-on-one, I'm going to do an interview. Just going to ask yourself a series of questions, because you're not going to pick one elicitation technique. You could have a situation where all of these apply and then some, right? So just going through, thinking about, hold on, I'm writing a note for myself. Okay. So you're going to think about a lot of stuff. Let's say that you've got your, the kind of elicitation you need to do, and you're trying to decide on specifics. Well, like I said, getting everyone all together for a workshop that used a lot of product when it comes to whiteboards and 3M paper and, colorful Post-it notes and, stickers and stuff like that. Well, that costs time and money. So can we absorb that? Are we willing to do that? So we got to think about, how much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? Is the organization going to tolerate that? Where am I getting my requirements from? The culture, we've talked about most of these things already. So what is the culture like? Does it allow me to do colorful, fun, collaborative stuff, or are they stuffy? What are the outcomes I'm looking for? That'll determine what kind of information I'm trying to elicit, which will determine what kind of techniques I use to elicit that information. Have I done this before? Is this effort, this change initiative, is it similar to others I've done before in this same environment with these same people? So similar initiative, I've done AP projects to AP projects. I've done multiple HR projects. I've done multiple marketing projects. So just because I'm doing a similar initiative in the past, if it's with different people, may not apply, right? So I've got to think about, when I say similar initiatives, I need to think about not just the change that was done, but the kind of people involved too, and the kind of culture I was in and stuff like that. So, but if I've had something that is truly similar and I have some specific techniques that worked in the past, don't reinvent the wheel, right? Go ahead and use some of those same things. That doesn't mean you don't try new stuff. You should. But if you've got, depending on the situation, you'll know whether it's appropriate for you to do experimentation. And techniques suitable for the situation. That goes with everything else that I've already said, right? So that would just be repetitive. So you're going to think about all these things when you're trying to pick your techniques. So now that I know who's involved, what I need to do, what kind of activities I need to do in my elicitation session, when it's going to be, how long it's going to be. Now I need to set up my logistics. So based on the goals of this specific elicitation activity, I need to figure out where should I have it. I need to make sure that that location's available for the specified amount of time and has the right tools in the room, right? Does it have whiteboards? Does it have projector? Does it have this? Does it have that? If there are things that you have to reserve, like I have worked it in an environment where you reserve the room and then you reserve the projector separate because the projector was mobile. So I had to make sure that I could get a hold of the projector as well. Making sure that the people and their roles are defined and that they're available for the time and location specified. How am I going to be communicating about all of this? Have that defined up front and have it ready. Determine the techniques I'm going to use. So make sure that the room is capable of supporting that. Make sure that if I need to put up 3M paper, I have wall space. If I want to do whiteboarding, I need to have a whiteboard available to me for that. Am I going to present a presentation on, status or what I found or screen mock-ups I need to make sure that the room has stuff for me to do a structured walkthrough. So I'm going to think about my techniques so that I know the location, resources, etc. that I'm going to need. And also, for many people, this is less of a concern, but for those of you that engage individuals in multiple countries, you'll need to ensure that you understand the language that's going to be used in the room and plan accordingly. It would be really, really bad to go to a meeting and find out that they don't speak the language. You have your slide decks built in, right? So you want to make sure that you've got that, you're thinking about that. And then we also need to make sure that we have access to the other stuff we need. So identify the sources of information So maybe thinking about people and materials and documents and stuff like that that I need in the room in order for us to collaborate well and understand and talk about and elicit what we need. I got to make sure I have access to that stuff, and I have to get them ready. They have to be prepared. So if I'm trying to elicit understanding of why a current process or form or system doesn't work, I need to make sure I have access to those forms, those people, the documentation associated with those processes. If it's not documented anywhere, well, my first thing is to create that information that we can use in the next meeting, right? But if there is existing information out there, you need to get your hands on it so that you can either leverage the knowledge from them or use them as examples or work through them directly with the people in the room. And then we need to prepare the people for what they can expect, right? You don't want to say, hey, we're going to elicit information on this thing that we're doing. You want to be able to tell them, hey, we're going to have an elicitation session. It's about this project. The kind of activities we'll be doing are ABC, right? Let them know in advance, especially if there's going to be interactive behavior expected. You don't want to surprise introverts with an expectation that they're going to have to walk around the room with colorful sticky notes and engage others and talk through stuff. They need to be aware of that up front so that they don't get surprised. Because if you surprise people, you lower the trust they have in you. The lower the trust they have in you, the less information they give you, the more likely your change initiative is to fail. There is a possibility of elicitation of information that comes directly out of documents or systems or things like that. And you don't need to prepare anybody, and you don't need to set up logistics. You just need to get your hands on the material and read through it. That is preparing. Preparing is you knowing what you need to do and you getting a hold of the information to do it with, right? Any questions on preparing for elicitation? Okay. Yes?
Yeah, hi, this is Rajdeep. I had a quick question.
Okay.
Now, during this whole process, we were talking about what if we don't do as a business analyst, we fail, or rather, it seemed that the onus of success is only dependent on the BA. I'm not challenging it, I'm just sharing my thoughts, but isn't it, or isn't there something for everybody involved in the process to make the project successful or the change successful?
Yes. However, if you expect something from someone and you don't prepare them for that expectation, then the failure is on you.
Right. The elicitation and the preparation of groundwork is okay. Got it. Okay.
Now, if you prepare
So
them,
laying groundwork is important.
right?
Okay.
Now, if you prepare them and
Mhm.
you have someone in the room that's resistant, so they're not sharing stuff with you purposefully,
Mhm.
and you're able to recognize that, and you don't
Mhm.
tell anyone of that risk, it's still owned by you. If you tell someone in leadership associated with the change initiative, hey, I'm having some challenges with a stakeholder or two, they're really scared, they're really resistant, they're frustrated. So I know they're not telling me everything. I need your help with getting that information. Could you help me build confidence in this group by championing why we're doing this for me again? Maybe that'll help, right? Now it's no longer you. Now the responsibility for that failure is shifted over to that leader and the people not behaving well.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it from where you're coming.
Yeah, and
Nice.
that's,
Thank you.
you bet. That's what's actually kind of hard about being a business analyst. Business analysts are usually driven by the fact that you're really, really great business analysts do what we do and put up with what we put up with because we are driven to make a difference for people. We love making a difference. Sure, most of us love solving problems. There's the thrill of the hunt of the, figuring stuff out. But ultimately, the only reason you stick with it is because you're making a difference. Because what we do, I have had some really awful stuff said to me, guys, and I keep doing what I do because I believe in what we do, and I'm driven by making a difference for people at work so that when they go home, they're less stressed. And I can take you even further. The current owner of the current company I work for, he was like, dude, must be exhausting in there. He's an interesting guy. in my head. He was saying it must be exhausting in my head. But so it's really hard when we have to hold people accountable, right? If we don't hold them accountable for what they're not doing, we are culpable in the failure. If we are doing everything we can, being politely, what I call it is honesty with humility and care. If we're doing that and expecting accountability of everyone around us, then we share that burden of success. But if we're not willing to, then the burden of success is ours. Does that make sense? I mean, that's how I see it.
Yes, absolutely. And one really quick observation and point that I wanted to point out. No, I've worked in a similar setting for too long, but when you brought up a matrix where you said different domains need different kind of techniques. So in my opinion, working as a business analyst, as an independent consultant, all across the domain is going to be a really tough thing because somebody is working in, let's say, a healthcare domain or a financial services domain for a very long time. They really understand the nitty-gritties of that particular industry. And they more they spend time in that industry, they get more comfortable and they are more receptive to the expectations and the kind of actions and initiatives and techniques that need to be used for particular projects in that space. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, everything that you said was accurate, but there are weaknesses in that approach as well. So if someone specializes in a vertical, a function, or a solution, what they are becoming is a subject matter expert. And with that comes assumptions and biases that become quite natural and are hard to recognize that you have. But it's comfortable because I have so many knowns that I don't feel like I can be as surprised, right? Now, unfortunately, the world around us pays extra for someone that's an expert, but they don't understand that they're getting a biased resource. What you're referring to I don't know if that's where you are or where you've been, but being a true consultants don't necessarily specialize in a specific vertical. And that's what makes consultants so powerful because they bring, when I come in the room, I used to be, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the old Life cereal commercials and no one at the table wanted it. So they shove it at Mikey because Mikey eats everything. Or he'll try anything. I'm always Mikey at the table in companies I'm at. I get the hardest problems, the hardest people, the stuff that no one else wants to deal with. And the reason I get that is because I haven't siloed myself. I have shown that as a true business analysis professional, you can put me in any problem with any group of people in any industry, and I'll figure it out, and I'll do pretty good at it. But one of the powerful elements of that is that I've grown comfortable in the uncomfortable. I have grown comfortable in chaos and undefined information. And so what that means is I'm not scared to ask what some people might think as embarrassing questions. And time and again, someone in the room goes, I don't know why we've never asked ourselves that. We've never tried to explain that. I don't think we even need to do that anymore, right? Stuff like that starts happening. So you need a subject matter expert and you need an unbiased, objective individual to ensure that we're thinking about all of the appropriate elements. That's hard to do when you're too close. Some can, but it's hard. Yeah.
I hope I didn't waste anybody's time.
Sorry, guys. Got me on a soapbox a little bit. That's okay, because these next two slide decks are really easy. So we've prepared for it. Now we're going to do it. So this is all about actually executing what we planned. Meeting. Plan for the meeting, have the meeting, review the results of the meeting. Same idea. This is where we're going to draw out and explore and identify information relevant to the change. We're going to actually execute those techniques we talked about to get as much information as possible and do our best to get complete requirements, right? And in that process, people are going to talk about, people are going to say, well, when this happens, we do this. Well, what if that doesn't happen, right? Get those exception situations and get implicit requirements. These are the requirements that no one talks about. We have to ask those obvious questions to get that out of people and go down to the necessary level of detail. Don't chase a rabbit down a hole, but do the necessary amount of digging, and use a good template. So when it comes to actually conducting it, follow a good cadence that you've done before, or use a good template for the process itself. I always use a slide deck to structure my elicitation activities. So I start off with a slide deck and say, this is why we're here. This is what we're going to do. This is the timing of each activity we're going to do. And this is how we're going to close. Just like training. It's a lot like training. So use a good template. There's researching. That's usually when you're just doing your own stuff on the background. You're not talking to a ton of people. Collaborative is when you're working with others and you're interacting and you're getting them to interact together. And experimentation is when you are testing stuff out, right? You're doing you might do role playing as a form of experimentation. Throwing together a prototype is a form of experimentation. So prototyping processes or technology solutions is what experimentation is about. Now, when we're thinking about these three types of elicitation, we want to guide. When we're doing this elicitation, we need to keep it on the rails. We need to make sure we keep everyone on track and try not to go down rabbit holes. Some rabbit holes are okay for a minute. If someone has a specific concern, you can't just like throw it off to the side. You address it for a minute or two, have that quick conversation. If they have not found comfort in what you're doing, then what we do is we put it on a parking lot. We never just say, well, that's not applicable here. We do a parking lot. When you do a parking lot, you're going to be able to keep people on track better because they feel, okay, I've been heard. She actually documented it. It won't be forgotten. I can focus again, right? So you're going to guide people through the elicitation activity. Even if you have an elicitation activity that's largely autonomous, you put people in teams and they do their thing, you don't go take a break and leave the room. You walk through the groups and you keep them on track and make sure they're doing what they need to be doing. And then you capture the elicitation outcomes. Now that's kind of hard if you're doing an elicitation activity so when I do mine and I'm eliciting current state, I'm drawing current state up. And then, I come back with drawn out on 3M paper, and now I have groups of people going around those papers and make, they talk about the process, the way it's written, make sure that they all agree, identify pain points, identify risks, and they start putting sticky notes up there. Well, if I've had rooms that I've had like 7 different groups going around the room. That's really hard to keep track of and challenge and capture the results and make sure that everyone's documenting the stuff they're talking about. So I get helpers. If you can have someone else while you're facilitating, if you can have someone else capturing that information that's being said, because you can only draw so much and you can only write so much on a board. But if you have someone else capturing additional outcomes, that's ideal. So we want to make sure that when we open up, we say, these are the goals of today. This is what we're changing and why. This is what we need to have come out of this activity together. And we need to understand who provides information, how they use it, etc. So we can structure our conversations and ensure that those people have a voice where appropriate and ensure that they're working together with that and make sure I have the right people up and communicating. If I have someone that's got really important information that's applicable to something we're speaking about right in this moment, and they're sitting back and being really, really quiet, I have to figure out a way to get them to speak up and move out into the group, right? But we got to focus. Again, parking lot, that's what that's great for. If you can alleviate if it's something that you think someone's brought up a concern, it's not specific to the goal, it's a little off track, but you think you can address it easily, give it a shot. Because then they really won't have to worry about it and they can focus better. If it's more complicated than that, you tell them, hey, that's a really great point. We need to look into that later. That's not the focus of today, but I definitely don't want to forget that. Could you write that on a sticky note and please go put it on our parking lot? I make them do it. Sorry, usually. But keep them focused. And ultimately, you record the information that was elicited during that activity. And usually requirements live a while. The length is less today than it has been in the past, because things change so fast, but we must record them preferably at the source, right? We need to know who came up with this requirement, what group owns this requirement, because later, if something's changing and I need to check on how that is impacted, I need to know who to go to. Any questions on conducting? That one was pretty straightforward, right? Okay, now we need to talk about confirming those results. This one's super fast, guys. So why should we confirm these results? This is where we're making sure that what we heard and what we understood is an accurate reflection of what the intention was. So I need to communicate those elicitation results with others and make sure I'm hearing things right? So if we don't do this, then we'll miss requirements. We might have conflicts, or we might have gotten it wrong. We're making a ton of assumptions. If we assume we're so good that we hear everything and we're always right about what we hear, then we're going to have problems, right? And so what we want to do is communicate that out. And then what people are going to do is they're going to respond back to you and say, oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you this. Or, I'm not sure about that. I think I might have communicated incorrectly. That's what they should say. Often what they say is, no, that's not what I meant. You got that wrong. It's all about the wording, right? We need to recognize those. Sometimes before we even send that out, what is ideal is that we compare these requirements to others and see if anything that we heard in that elicitation result conflicts with anything else. So I'm going to uncover those. That's my confirmation. I'm going to confirm these requirements, these results against other results, other requirements, other elicitation meetings and stuff like that. If I think I've got it good, I'm going to communicate it out to others, and I'm going to say, hey, does this look right? And they're going to tell me things that are incorrect. And the sooner I get that understood, the better. So that's why we want to confirm them as soon as possible. Okay. So I'm going to say, okay, this is what I heard and this is what I thought. Oh, they were talking about this other solution doing that thing. I might go to that solution and see, does that solution do what they thought it did? Because that sounds weird. Or maybe they're talking about policies and procedures and why they behaved it the way that they do, and they have to do what they're saying they do. And I might go back to the policies and validate that. Or I might find out that that's not what I understand that policy to mean. And that means I either have an ambiguous policy or our stakeholders are misunderstanding the expectations the business has set, right? The other thing that I'm going to do is if I've had multiple meetings with people about the same thing, like let's say that I've got something that's sensitive and I know that people are really frustrated about this thing, and the person I need to agree is really stubborn. And if it's coming from me, they're going to say, no, that's wrong, or no, I'm not going to do that. So what I might do is I might find the people that lead up to that person, and I'm going to get them one at a time. And it's called step laddering. It's not a technique in your book, but it's out there. It's called step laddering. And I'm going to start with someone that I think is reasonable and is open to conversation. We're going to have that conversation. And then I'm going to get the next person. Now that I've got the result of that, I'm going to see what that next person says. I'm going to compare those results with one another, find any kind of discrepancies or gaps, and then I'm going to pull those two together and get them on the same page. And then I'm going to ultimately do that until I get what I need to get. I can, if I'm having conversations about requirements and I've already done current and future state, and I've got process models for that, and people are talking about stuff that they need in their pains, I'm going to compare that list of requirements that were elicited to the previous sessions that we've had with process, and I'm going to make sure it fits. So I'm going to compare those results against source and other elicitation results. So I'm going to look at various elicitation results and compare them together. And if I find any discrepancies, I'm going to follow up with others to figure out what did I miss. I need to get that fixed before we move forward. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is communicate. We're going to communicate all of this stuff to others. So, communication can come in any form. It's any way that we engage with someone else and share information in the appropriate format in order to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when we talk about where requirements come from, where do they go? what does that communication look like? Well, so on the side of the business, you'll have your sponsor that approves, they're the ones that are willing to spend the money. Then you've got your domain subject matter experts. These are the people that specialize in that domain. Ideally, that's not the business analyst. You have end users that are so domain SMEs are usually like a lead analyst in the environment, like a lead financial analyst or a lead accountant or a lead marketing specialist or a manager of those people, things like that. And then they manage those end users. Both perspectives need to be heard because domain SMEs are usually in a leadership level function. And they often interact with the solution differently than the people that do the detail tactical work every day. And then also on the requirement side, you have regulators that and there are others over there, but these are the main ones. On the technical side, you have your implementation SME. That's your implementation subject matter expert. That is any resource that is responsible for the capability of implementing. It's going to be, if you're talking tech, it's developers and DBAs. It's if you're talking process, your domain SME could be both on the business and they could be an implementation SME, because your domain SME could be a manager that's also responsible for implementing the new process. Implementation SMEs could be HR if training is required, or if process change communication is necessary, they could be considered an implementation SME. Anyone responsible for helping implement the solution. Project managers are typically not in the business, and your testers, your quality assurance resources. And ideally, all of these people are not the BA. Okay. And then the BA takes everything they're getting from both sides and putting it in a centralized repository, ensuring it's all cohesive and ensuring that none of these individuals have conflicting understanding or need associated with these requirements we're working on. And I'm going to communicate these requirements to all of them. Now, when I'm communicating to the PM, they care about different things than the sponsor does, who cares about different things than your implementation SMEs or your testers. And so every one of these individuals care about the information differently. Now that can be really difficult on layers of abstraction. When I share information with these two and this one, these four groups I give the same package to. This one doesn't get anything from me. This one gets, unless we're in an audit, this one gets really high level abstraction like a business case or concept models and stuff like that. And this one gets a lot more detail when it comes to the tasks that I've identified and the risks that I've identified and the stakeholders I've identified, because they need to know what to manage. They don't have to read all the details of the requirements. They just need to understand the tactical elements of implementing the change. Okay. So that's how you flow your requirements information out to people, or your BA information out to those resources. And that takes into consideration abstraction, right? Different views for different stakeholder groups. Now, communication is one of the harder things we do. Communication and collaboration are one of the harder things the business analyst does, because different people come from very different backgrounds. And so even if you're all in the same domain, you're all in insurance, you're all in retail, whatever, right? Even if you're from different domains, you come from different personal backgrounds. People have different triggers from one another. Some things might not offend one person, but greatly offends another. One person might expect certain type of communication or structure in maybe one group of stakeholders likes really formal and one likes informal. So it's really important to understand where people are coming from and what their preferences are and what their triggers are. And you also want to understand what level of capability do they have at consuming your information. The detail level I give to a developer or a DBA is not what I give my business people. Usually when it comes to like ERDs, I don't show my ERDs to the business. I give that to the technical. Requirements and process models, I give to both, because both need to understand it and both should have skill to read it. But screen mockups, both. Use cases and activity diagrams, both. ERDs, data dictionaries, sequence diagrams, technical resources, right? So you think about your stakeholders and what skill they have in understanding things. Now, sometimes you need a stakeholder to read something that they don't have a skill for. That doesn't mean you don't give it to them. that means you help them understand it, right? Understanding the challenge and overcoming it, whether it's sharing certain types of information with certain types of people, that's one challenge. Educating people on how to read what you need them to understand, that's another challenge. So we've got to think about those things. We've already talked about communicating at the right time in the right format, ensuring stakeholders understand and can agree. If there are any disagreements, try to resolve them. Not everyone has to love it. They just have to agree to move forward. Okay? They don't have to agree that it's perfect. They just have to agree that they will work with it. So when we're thinking about this, we need to understand, what are we trying to accomplish with this communication we're sending out? And then we need to communicate that business analysis package. So what is my goal here? Do I want them to approve it? Do I just want feedback? Is it just informal, hey, FYI? What are the objectives of what I'm trying to get out of this communication? What do I expect to come back? And based on that, I need to prepare my package to convey that very clearly and in a format that's usable for what I'm asking them for. So if I want them to help provide feedback on requirements, I need to give them a way to approve or reject, and I need to give them a way to comment without completely altering the document without me knowing. So like turn on change tracking and don't let them turn it off. Stuff like that. I need to make sure that it's usable for what I'm trying to accomplish and that it's clear to the recipient what the purpose is and what I expect of them. Now, if we do that well, we're going to be much more effective at communicating out those requirements and designs to stakeholder. We're going to be able to make sure that we're doing a good job, make sure it's good, make sure it's done with quality. And that's going to help us ensure quality of the long-term solution, and it's going to help us plan better if we've communicated this effectively and it does its job. It also helps us when we're talking about these is one of the things we might need to make sure that we are preparing ourselves to evaluate alternatives and that we are getting formal reviews and approvals. Now, these are the different reasons we would do this. Just communicating, very seldom. I don't know if I've ever just communicated requirements and designs to stakeholders. I'm usually asking them, is this done well? Does it look right? I'm usually sending stuff out to people and saying, hey, these are the solution options I'm finding. What else do you got? And what do you think about these? And then getting approval. I'm very seldom just communicating to communicate. I usually have an actionable expectation from the people I'm sending this to. It gives us an opportunity for people to give input and to people have a voice, right? It gives them, when you give people a voice and you don't just, I had someone that was doing some strategy work for an organization I work for, and they were, they didn't have near the experience I do at doing that. So I was like offering help. I was like, hey, how can I help you out? And they were like, well, really, I don't really need any help. I mean, I know what this company needs and I know what people need. So I'm just, it's no big deal. I'm putting it together. Okay, well, that kind of an approach is going to very likely cause a lot of resistance, even if it is the right solution, right? People need to have a voice. So it gives them an opportunity to give feedback and have a voice. It also has an opportunity for you to identify if there are any obligations that you might be conflicting with. So that helps protect the organization. And if I communicate these objectives and formats and I document things in a way that supports that, I'm very likely keeping those requirements done in a way that they're reusable. So we've talked about packages, BA information packages. That is the collection of information put into a package to help someone understand, consume, and act on it if appropriate. So this is typically like a BA information package would be things like a combination of documents. Sometimes your BRD is the package, but in a BRD, you have current state, future state. You often have requirements and use cases and screen mockups or data elements or all kinds of stuff, right? And those are actually different work products all on their own, but they're combined into a package called a BRD. It might actually be just a bunch of epics with stories or acceptance criteria, right? So when we're communicating these packages, If your organization has a structured way about doing things like BRDs, SRSs, stuff like that, then you're probably going to utilize those templates to communicate that out and be really consistent. And consistency is really, really good. It doesn't mean informal is not good or informal is bad. It just means informal, even in a formal environment, informal documentation still has its place. But anytime you're doing any change of any size, you're probably going to want to be a little bit more formal and get that documented so that we know what we did and why. And in the next iteration or the iteration after that or an iteration a year down the road, we can refer to that and update it instead of creating from scratch again. When you communicate this out and it's put together in a way that it has in it what that stakeholder is going to care about, they're going to absorb that a lot better because it's the level of information they want, right? And it gives them an opportunity to have a voice. They can look at it, they can tell you things they're concerned about, they can let you know where you might have missed the mark, and that helps us be a lot more successful long term. I've seen so many times where a business analyst goes, they get the information, they come back, they convert it into what they think it means, and then we just start building instead of validating first, because validating takes time, it slows us down. Well, it slows us down from hitting the development cycle, but it doesn't necessarily slow us down in getting an accurate solution out the door. It often delays it, right? So that's all about that instant gratification challenge that most business analysts have to deal with. So it's very important to think about your recipient and communicate a package with the appropriate elements that make sense for that person. That's about abstraction. Maybe you have a group collaboration tool like Teams or SharePoint or an actual requirements management tool or something like that. Maybe you are in an environment where you just store your stuff in Word and Excel on your local machine and you email it out when appropriate and people send you their own individual comments. It's not like a collective thing. And then there's also where you email groups or you have other nonverbal methods of communicating that information out and getting feedback. Any questions?
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so you were speaking about the communicating and asking the questions to the users, the end user. So, for example, if you give just open-ended question to the user, you might get actually what they want to know. But if you just provide them the options that whether to do this, do A or do B, then you are actually narrowing down your choices, and then you might not get exactly what they're looking for, but you'll get what you are looking for. So, which way is just confused with that?
Okay, so you're talking about open versus closed-ended questions, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's part of interviewing, and both are appropriate in certain circumstances. We're not when we're talking about communicating the BA package, we're beyond the interviewing process. We've done a ton of open-ended questions. We've had collaborative conversations. I don't ever recommend emailing any open-ended questions. I don't like doing that because often when I do an open-ended question and they have a whole narrative they send back to me, that results in me thinking about a ton of other questions to ask. So I use closed-ended questions for surveys, and I usually only use those kind of things when I'm trying to understand where do I even start. Like one of my first projects at a large company here locally was they had this table. They thought it was an Access, but it was actually a SQL backend with an Access front end. And then no one liked that Access front end, so everyone downloaded their own Excel versions. It was phenomenal. And that was a big problem. When we were building stores, sometimes we would send all of the materials to a completely wrong address because we had 5 different versions of the store in completely different places. And so they said, hey, we need you to fix the stores table. I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know. Just figure it out. Well, who uses it? I don't know. So I did a survey in the beginning with very closed-ended questions. Do you know about the stores table? Do you read the stores table? Do you modify the stores table? Do you add stores? Do you delete stores? That was it. that closed-ended question led me to understanding who I got together, and I ask my open-ended questions in groups. The only other time I ask open-ended questions if I'm like analyzing the requirements and I'm not ready to send out a package. I have a specific work product I'm just really not confident with, and I've still got outstanding questions. I might send out a couple of emails trying to understand that. Those would be open-ended questions. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. We have one more task and then we have the techniques. You will be kept a little bit long, but it won't be bad. Okay. And this is one of our shortest slide decks in all of the Babok, and it's one of the most painful, difficult things we do. Getting people to play nice together and play nice with you. So the whole point of this is to encourage our stakeholders to work together, right? We're all trying to go to the same place. Let's do that together. As soon as we start understanding the stakeholders that are involved and I understand who they are, I'm starting to plan out and manage how I'm going to help them work together. At any given point, anywhere along the way, I might identify a new stakeholder. Once I've analyzed that stakeholder, I take them into the context of all of the stakeholders and try to understand how that modifies my expectations for ensuring that everyone is working nicely together, right? So I'm going to be thinking about that. If I do this well, meaning even when it's difficult, be carefully honest, what's going to happen is I'm going to start building trust with the group. We're going to start having more positive conversations. And we're going to avoid the very high likelihood of people not sharing information. People being negative, openly negative in the room. Like, remember that example I gave you where first 5 minutes, man, people telling me we hate each other, we're not going to work together, this is going to suck, good luck, right? I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do with that? Well, I was honest. I said, okay, well, that's not very healthy, first of all, right? I just had a conversation with them about it. And I was honest. I might not be successful with this. Yeah, your sponsors should be in the room. If they haven't talked to you directly about it, they should introduce it and say why we're here. Totally right on that. The only thing I can tell you is, based on what you just told me, you just got yourself in trouble because you're going to be uncomfortable because I'm going to change things up and you're going to have to work together. And I'm honest about why. I tell them why. I tell them if I can't help you find a way to appreciate one another and work together, then you won't, all of the pains that I know that you have, they won't ever be addressed. So it's really on you to be willing and open and to adjust and to trust me a little bit. If you choose not to trust me, then the failure of this will be yours, not mine. Right? So when you're able to do that and you understand your group and you are willing to address those negative reactions and be polite with it and be hopeful and helpful, but being honest about it, people will trust because you've already been honest. Now they trust even when it's difficult, you've been honest. Now they're going to trust that you're going to be honest in general. Some people still won't respond well to that because they are just resistant to change. And you can't fix that because that's a more inherent issue of fear. And that is theirs. That's their insecurities. You can't force that to change for them. You can encourage them by trying to make it as collaborative and trying to make it enjoyable as much as possible. But you're going to have people that are just going to be resistant to change. So in my world, the way I see it is as long as I am being politely honest, I'm willing to be uncomfortable, I'm fighting for what's right for them and everything, then, I mean, some of them just aren't going to like me. And these things aren't about me being liked. It's about me being honest so they can trust me. Me trying to be honest about the challenge while I'm also, if it's honest, being really positive about where we're going. And I always find something positive, even in a crappy situation. And when I do that and I'm honest about why, I'm like, hey, man, we're here. We're stuck. So if we can all work together, then we'll find some good in this. I promise we'll find something good in this. But we got to do it. I mean, we don't have a choice, right? So if we're honest about it and we know these people, we figure these people out and we engage in things in ways that we push those boundaries and we encourage that innovation and we put people in situations that they kind of have to collaborate, Usually what happens is the relationships, by the time they leave your facilitation, they're usually improved in some way. Not always. Sometimes it gets a bit heated, and that's okay. It happens. We're all human. What's important is how we respond to that and what we do next. The whole purpose of getting collaboration is we got to agree. We don't have to love it. We just have to agree. Agree to move forward. We are going to, as analysts, we're going to constantly monitor that engagement to make sure people stay engaged, because if they're not engaged, they can't collaborate. So we need to agree. We need to identify and agree on what time we're willing to commit and who's going to be involved as early as possible, right? Negotiate this with your resources. Hey, I'm going to need you once a week for about an hour. Is there a particular day you like the best? Right? I've set that expectation up front. I'm not going to need you just once. I need you every week for a while. Things like that. So talk about that. And then that person might be, that's fine. I just can't do end of month and I can't do Wednesdays. Okay, great. I'll avoid those things. So you've negotiated the terms and conditions of engaging them together. Then you need to monitor this. Make sure everyone's participating. Like I said, if you see that introvert that's just not stepping forward, figure out a way to help them do that. Help them be comfortable with that. You're able to confirm the results and get understanding of where things are missing. If you don't monitor that stakeholder engagement and people are checked out, you might have very incorrect information out as a result. Keep their interest up as well as their commitment. So make it engaging, make it interesting. Think about they're with them and do things that force their commitment. Because I'm not the only one standing up. I start the process by drawing out the processes I'm hearing. But when we're talking about identifying the pains, what are the constraints? Are there any regulatory compliance concerns? What are your requirements? In my elicitation sessions, I'm up at the board drawing, or up at the 3M paper, drawing out the processes they're talking about. And then I have papers for risks and stakeholders and requirements and pains. And they have sticky notes that they have to write that information on. So now they have a reason to stay engaged because they have a color assigned to them, and it becomes almost a competition. So if I've got red, pink, and blue, and I got 3 people in the room and there's no blue up on the wall, that person's going to be a little embarrassed. So when they start writing their own information and adding it to what you're writing, now they're both engaged and committed because it's their writing. Right? So that's one of the reasons I have people write their own user stories. And when I do elicitation, I'm not the only one writing and drawing. Any questions about managing stakeholder collaboration? Monitoring, I think it was. I can't remember. There's another one that you're going to cover that's about getting people to collaborate next weekend, and it talks a little bit more detail about it. Okay, the last thing we have to cover is techniques. And then I will set you free after I show you some information about requirements management tools, since I don't get you next weekend. Okay, introduction to elicitation techniques. We're going to talk about some information here. Some of these tasks are going to repeat the elicitation stuff. I don't know why, but we're going to cover them real quick. So when we're thinking about elicitation, how well do you understand the domain? You don't need to be an expert, but you need to know just enough to be able to ask good questions, right? You can get enough domain understanding. If you are new to a domain, at least all you have to do is go read some best practice white papers and stuff like that, and you'll get an idea of what you need to ask. Be prepared. Make sure that you're documenting well. And if you're not good at writing, find someone that is to help you. Make sure your stakeholders understand what they're getting into and they're ready for it. Make sure that your stakeholders are all on the same page and clear on what your goals are, why they are in the room, okay? So they need to be ready to engage in the elicitation activities you have planned, especially if it's collaborative. But they also need to understand and be all on the same page about where are we going and why are we here? And understanding the rapport between stakeholders. It's not a requirement that they get along. It's a requirement that you help them get along as much as possible for the purpose of this effort, okay? We've already talked about you prepare, you conduct, Closure and follow-up are the same thing as confirm elicitation results. Those two go together in confirm. In prepare, we've already talked about this. Set an objective. Make sure you know who's involved and what they do. Make sure you're ready with whatever you're going to be asking. Make sure you've got the room ready, stuff like that. Conducting, sorry, this is really repetitive. When you conduct it, I mentioned verbally, I don't think it was clear on the slide, but you open, say thank you for being here, introduce yourself, introduce why you're there, introduce what you're going to be talking about, what are the goals that you're going to be discussing, keep everyone on track. If information is presented, like I described to you with that elicitation session, I had some stuff planned and I go in there and they give me this new information. I'm like, oh man, got to change everything up. You got to be able to adapt. I mean, business analysts are one of the most adaptable skill sets in business. So you're going to be expected to adapt. And if you're asking them to come talk about a specific thing, make sure they have the necessary information to be useful and valuable and not waste their time or anybody else's when they get there. And then you close. You make sure that you covered everything. Give them expectations about what's next. Tell them how to reach you if they need to. If you're in the company, that's really easy. Thank them for their time. You thank them in the beginning. You thank them in the end. And when it's done, you send out the results and the information and you follow up if needed. Okay, that was just a repetition of like the last 3 or 4 slide decks. Okay, we're going to talk about some techniques. This is an individual activity. This is a research activity, document analysis. This is simply where you go get your hands on existing documentation and you analyze that. You read it, you try to get what you can out of it. And this is usually best it's usually best if you do this before you engage your actual stakeholders so that you can go in prepared and you don't ask them questions that a document can answer for you. Now, a lot of the times these documents, especially in our world today, a lot of the times these documents aren't necessarily up to date. So it is still important that you validate what you understand from those documents with people. Okay, so make sure that those documents represent actual reality. And what document analysis also does is it helps you solidify your understanding of the context of what we're trying to accomplish and what it's going to mean to your organization and what that elicitation experience is probably going to be like for you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about engaging others for elicitation. Individual techniques. Interviews, surveys and questionnaires and observation. Usually you start, if there's going to be a survey, it's usually really early in the change process. It's often one of the very first things you do. A survey is usually done when you don't know very much and you're trying to understand from a large group of people, how far does this reach? Like I was saying with that stores table thing. I was able to recognize that 90% of the organization used that stores table in some form or fashion. So I had a room full of, I think it was 30 people, completely different situation as from before. And what was interesting is none of them used it the same way. 30% of the fields in the table, no one knew what was used for it. So surveys and questionnaires are good. Surveys are good for closed-ended questions. Questionnaires are good for open-ended questions. And if you have open-ended questions, that is a lot harder to do any kind of analytics on. So you won't do any analytics on questionnaires that are open-ended. You will use it to have a better understanding of context so you know who to engage and who you don't want to engage and the kind of things that might get in your way. Then you probably go into the interview process, individual-based interviews. You can have a group interview, by the way, but usually interviews are individuals. Usually when you have a group together, it's not an individual. It's usually like a workshop or something, but interviews are usually one-on-one. You can have open or closed-ended interviews, open or closed-ended questions. You can have a list of questions that you're asking, and that's a lot more closed-ended. Or you can have an open-ended interview. There's structured versus unstructured. So there's open-ended questions, closed-ended questions. But then you have, when it comes to the interview style, you can have structured or unstructured interview. Structured interviews, you have a list of questions that you want to ask. Open or closed-ended, it doesn't matter. Unstructured interview is just like exploratory. You don't even know what you need to ask necessarily. You know where you need to start, but an unstructured interview is essentially, it's almost just like a conversation. Observation. Once you get to the point where you know enough and you have an activity you're trying to improve and it's something that someone does, you can do observation. There is active and passive observation. Passive observation is when you just sit there and you watch. You don't ask questions. You don't interrupt. You just watch, right? Then you have active observation, which is when you don't understand something, you interrupt and you ask questions about why people do something like that. There is also when it comes to passive observation, there is the ability to make that person observed aware or be unaware. If they are aware that you're watching, they very well might modify behavior. I think it's called the Hawkins effect. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's observation. You have a risk of when it's passive aware, there's a risk that the individual will modify their behavior because they know they're being watched. So when you're doing passive, it's usually best if they're not aware, so that you see the raw behavior and you see the workarounds that people have, or you see the things that people do to skip stuff. And then we have group-based. And we've talked about some of these already. Brainstorming is just kind of open-ended. You're supposed to do it with a theme, but it's just to generate ideas. We don't poo-poo any ideas. All ideas are welcome. We don't challenge them. We don't debate them. We're just generating ideas. We can challenge them later or prioritize them later. Workshops are very collaborative. They get detailed requirements to get consensus, ideally. We've talked about collaborative games. It's about gamifying it. That works with some individuals. Some individuals get really uncomfortable with it. And focus groups focus on a specific aspect as a group. And it's usually... it's structured and facilitated, but it's not the same thing as a workshop. A focus group focuses on a specific thing and people just like debate stuff together. And the facilitator keeps them on track and makes sure they're talking about the right stuff. When we're talking about group-based techniques, we have the author, which is the person that's going to write up everything. Hold on just 1 second. I want to look at something. Sorry, hold on just a second. I want to make sure of something. I've noticed a challenge in the past and I want to make sure. Sorry, a little bit of patience for me, please. This is review roles, so those don't apply. Oh my goodness. Where is it? Okay, here we go. Sponsor, facilitator, scribe, timekeeper, and participant. So when you're talking about group-based techniques, facilitator, scribe, timekeeper, participant. So I don't remember seeing author in the workshops. That's one of the reasons I wanted to jump over here. Hold on. Yeah, no, workshops. Okay. No, so it needs to be, I think scribe was in there. Okay. Sponsor, facilitator, scribe, timekeeper, participant. That's the group elicitation session. Those are the roles that are typically in a successful workshop. Okay. So you've got facilitator. Participants is the same thing as contributors. This is participants. So facilitator, participants, scribe is there. They're the ones that document everything. And then you usually, ideally, have the timekeeper. Often that's the same thing as the facilitator. And hopefully the sponsor is there, at least in the beginning. Doesn't have to always be. So for the workshop, for the group-based techniques, the roles, these are the roles that are in the BABOK. Okay. Prototyping. Any questions about that? Sorry, that was a little convoluted. I was just looking at that slide and had a discomfort. So any questions about that? Okay, let's talk about prototyping. This is the last technique we're going to cover, and then I will show you some requirements management tool options. But so prototyping is when is very widely used for product design. It's usually something physical or tangible, but you can also use it for process prototyping. But one of the things when we're talking about technology, prototyping helps us tell the story about user experience and user interface much better than just textual requirements. Textual requirements are not enough when you're talking software, because I'm telling you, if you don't draw the picture and get everyone on the same page, the developer will often not have in their head what the customer has in their head. So it's really important that we be willing, and a lot of agile environments kind of resist this a little bit, which is unfortunate, but we really need to be willing to allow the business analyst or a user experience expert to detail the UI requirements. If you have a UX expert, that person needs to work hand in hand with the business analyst. Honestly, I prefer to doing that work myself, but if there's a user, I prefer doing what I think the business needs, and then I present that to a UX expert, and they tell me what I need to tweak from a usability standards perspective. That's the ideal thing. When we prototype, we're all clear. So when you hear a story and someone else next to you hears a story, and you're both painting a picture of something, right? You're painting a picture of this story, and the story is about people, right? You're both probably, you both are imagining people doing the things described in the story, but they probably look different. They probably move different. They probably talk a little different about it. So you're not on the same page, really. On the overall idea, maybe, but not on the same page. And that's the same idea with designing solutions. Putting it in pictures is so very important. Okay, we have throwaway and evolutionary. Throwaway is something that you don't intend on using again. It's usually two-dimensional, and it is meant to paint a story through pictures, right? It's usually what happens when you use like a requirements management tool or Visio or something like that. It's easy, it's quick, and it can be modified quickly, okay? Evolutionary or functional is usually in tools like if you've got SAP or something and you model out the changes, all you have to do if people say yes is you move that into the production cycle, right? That's a functional prototype. What I've designed is actually usable, and it will move into a fully functioning system later. That is more effort. It takes more time. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can mess up other things, right? And we're making a lot of assumptions when we do these prototypes. So it's very likely that you're going to have to redo more effort in a functional prototype. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means be aware of that when you're doing these things. If it's a pretty straightforward change, great, do this. If you're designing a whole new system, it's probably better to start here. If you're designing a whole new screen, it's probably better to start right here. Anytime, now when you have something like SAP or something and you've got small to medium change, this is fine, this is useful. If you've got something that you're doing custom development on and you're using this to do your screen mockups or your prototypes, this is a lot more work than this. So you're taking up more time. I mean, with how fast I can throw together a screen mockup, it just doesn't make sense to do functional in my world. Okay, so these are just some examples. These are not, I don't think, hold on. Two common approaches. This isn't mentioned in ours. I don't know if it's not on the test, and that's why he doesn't have it in there, but this would at least be interesting for you guys to read. Okay, there are many forms of prototyping. Each of the following can be considered a form of prototyping. And these are not the only way to prototype. I want to be clear about that. This says prototyping methods. What it's intending to say is this is some commonly used. It's not all that you have, right? So we have storyboarding, which is where you kind of like tell a story with pictures about the experience of users and activities. Paper prototyping, that's where you're just using a paper and pencil to draft it. Workflow modeling. Basically, it's process modeling, essentially, and you're just showing how people work through processes and how that interacts with tech. And then simulation is where you will actually, it might be functional, it might not. You could actually some prototyping tools or screen mockup tools allow you to link them together and build hotspots in it to show flow and stuff. That would be kind of simulation. That's one level of simulation. Full evolutionary prototyping gives you true simulation. Okay, so those are some considerations for some techniques. That's not all of the techniques in elicitation and collaboration. So if you go to the elicitation and collaboration section, in each task, you will see the whole BABOK is structured this way. Every task has a purpose and a description, inputs, elements that make up that task, like understanding scope, selecting techniques, etc., guidelines and tools. So in this image right here, business analysis approach, business objective, down here in this area, it'll give you what that a guideline or tool was, and then it'll tell you how it impacts this specific task. This is why reading the BABOK will be really helpful eventually before your test, because it will help you connect to it a little bit better. And then it lists all of the techniques. So we didn't cover, each one of these tasks has techniques. Some of them are the same, some of them are different. I mean, look at all these. We did not cover all of those in today's session, and we can't. The techniques are many. So what you will want to do is understand in the techniques section for your test, you're going to want to understand what is the technique, what is its purpose. This is the minimum you need to try to memorize. What's the technique and its purpose? What are its strengths and limitations? That's what's going to help you from the perspective of ECBA and CCBA for your knowledge and theory questions. Your knowledge and theory questions are not going to ask you about testability or measuring or value attributes. It's going to ask you which of the following techniques helps us define the requirements, outcomes, or conditions that must be met in order for a solution to be considered acceptable. And you're going to have options, and you're going to know, oh, that's acceptance and evaluation criteria.
Yes. Could you please repeat what you suggest we should know for techniques and all of that stuff that you were talking about? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I know that.
In the techniques, you're going to want to know what is the technique name, what is its purpose, and what are its strengths and limitations. That's about it. ECBA will probably be able to be sufficient with understanding the purpose of it, because usually in your knowledge and theory, what you'll find is it'll ask you which of the following techniques is used to define the requirements, outcomes, or conditions that must be met in order for a solution to be considered acceptable. And you're going to have a list of options, and it'll say benchmarking and market analysis. It'll say lessons learned, it'll say decision modeling, and then it'll say acceptance and evaluation criteria. And you'll go, oh, I know that's acceptance and evaluation criteria. That's like an ECBA level question. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, know that for all of those. CCBA and CBAP will definitely need to know the strengths and limitations. CCBA mostly with just strengths and limitations, because it'll say which of the following is a strength of this elicitation, this technique, and then you'll have to know. Or I'm sorry, actually that might apply to the ECBA as well. Ask LN on that. He took the ECBA test. I have not. I took the CBAP. With CCBA and CBAP, they'll tell you a little story, right? And the story will include something that says something about you're working on this project, this is the goal. It includes some contractual obligations, blah, 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 blah. Which of the following techniques will help you ensure that you're meeting the need effectively? And because it said contractual obligations, you're going to know to say acceptance and evaluation criteria is what should be used in this situation. That is a real life application scenario question that you would have. Okay, so that's the kind of thinking that you would want to have. Any questions? Okay, so the last thing I want to share with you is going to require me to get open. Okay, I'm going to put some links in your chat window. Oh, wait, hold on. I've got a few chats. Yes, it definitely requires great people skills. That was a while back. I'm sorry, I'm just now seeing that. Is having the ability to make everyone involved feel like they're part of the solution. That is important. Yes, that is important. Buy-in is important. People can derail the best solution. People can derail the best solution. So there's a book called, and this is where most environments don't understand and don't know what they should be letting their business analysts do. Change is so much more about people than it is tech, process, and stuff like that. So people can derail, like I said, people can derail even the best solutions, the best strategies. So there's a book out there called Culture Eats Strategy for Lunch. It's by Peter Drucker. There's Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast is a really good, I don't know why this is showing for lunch. There might be a second book. So this is a really good book to help explain why it's so important that the people, the culture is about people and their beliefs and attitudes. And that's really, really, really hard to shift. And it's very, very sensitive. And if we aren't aware of that, you have often every time you implement change, you are impacting culture and people. So it's important to be aware of that. And if the change that you're enacting requires a shift in the structure, like a shift in the culture, like I worked somewhere where there was really no accountability and it was causing so much havoc. And they wanted me to implement a technology tool. And I was like, guys, I mean, that's going to be great, but it's going to automate stuff, but there's still no accountability. And the only way you're going to fix the problem you have is if you implement accountability. And so they asked me to help them shift the culture using this technology project to do so. And I'm like, you have to shift that. I'll support it. I'll integrate it in this project. But the voice of that culture shift must start with you. And that's something really hard for a lot of business analysts to insist upon. I wasn't even good at that 4 years ago. I'm significantly better at it now because I've been hurt enough. But like I'll tell leadership, I'm happy to support this and I'm happy to enable it through, change initiatives, but you have to be the voice of it before I ever talk to anybody about it. And they have to know that I am supporting you and your voice. So culture can derail the best solutions. Okay. What other question do we have? That was it. Rajdeep, if you wouldn't mind, have you already sent me a connection request on LinkedIn?
Yes, sorry, I understood that before, and I shouldn't have. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. So if you would make sure that you just send me that, make sure that's sent. Yeah, I'll absolutely accept. I'll recognize you from the class. Okay, I want to show you guys this. It's a little older. This is about 3.5 years old now. They used to do it every 3 years. I don't know if they're going to do it this year. But for the years that I watched it, for the years that I reviewed it, they were spot on every time on their requirements. I went ahead and sent you that first link because I'm not sure if this will take you there. Okay. So I'm going to run you through this really, really briefly. I need to let you guys go in at least I need to keep you no more than 5 or 8 more minutes. So with this, it's a full-on requirements analysis, requirements tool analysis, and they give you executive summary, what they did, how they went about prioritization and scoring, limitations. It gives you all that good stuff. And then I'm going to skip to the bottom so you can see how many requirements management tools were out there 3 years ago. So they had, I don't know, what is that, like 16 or so tools that are no longer in place. They have over a page and a half, 2 columns of tools that they evaluated and found to not be effective at managing requirements. Okay. And some of them would probably surprise you. Okay. And then they came to tools that made it through this phase, but didn't get to the final phase because they were lacking. And then they have the top 21. And then you go all the way to the top again, and you can see how those top 21 ranked against one another. Some of these are inexpensive, some of them are not. But here are some tool options. And for every tool, they have some narration about it. So they tell you what is the tool, what are its strengths, and what are its limitations. Okay. I have done my own evaluation every 2 years, and Top Team Analyst has been my preferred choice the entire time for requirements management, not for architecture or anything like that. I prefer other tools for that, but for requirements management, this is my go-to. Okay. This I used to like better than I do now, but it has lended itself a lot more to Agile, and I can't really use it for the dynamic approach that I take. And Top Team Analyst and Modern Requirements Tools, these are my favorite 2 right now. Modern Requirements Tool Suite is a tool that just sits on top of all of the Microsoft suites. The TFS and the I think the TFS has changed a little bit. It's like, I can't remember what they call it now, but TFS and Word and Excel, all of the Office suite, Visio, it just lays on top of all of that. But this is my preferred. This is built off of everything you're learning this month. This is built off of IIBA standards, and it supports both predictive and adaptive flow. Okay, so that's something to consider. I'm going to show you some stuff on the Top Team Analyst. Real quick. Okay. So I'm going to send you this link so you can get to both. I'm going to show you Top Team Analyst, and then I'm going to explain a little tiny thing on visual use case that you will all absolutely love. Okay. So first, let's look at this. I want to show you the screenshots. The stuff that we talked about business analysis, planning and monitoring, elicitation and collaboration, and the things you're going to learn next week are all kind of outlined here. This is when we talked about what is your, how are you going to store and access information, who needs what, stuff like that. This is mine doesn't look like this. Mine has strategy analysis, and under strategy analysis, I have business process diagrams, stakeholders, and business objectives / business requirements. Underneath, so I have my current and future state. My process modeling is under strategy analysis. Under requirements analysis, I have things like my use cases. My actors are actually underneath. Actually, I have user experience, requirements, and data, right? And so I have those under my requirements analysis and design. And under my data, I have my ER diagrams, my data dictionaries, my glossary is actually up in strategy. And then I have under the user experience, I have my screen mock-ups, I have my use cases and things like that. So this helps you structure. And remember we talked about having a BRD or an SRS, because that helps you ensure you've got complete requirements because you're using some form of a template. This acts as my template. Here's an example of a use case. This is where, so each one of these scenarios is essentially a user story. So this first scenario would be that the customer rents, as a customer, I need to be able to rent a video so I can enjoy my weekend with my family. As a customer, I need to be able to get a membership card. As a customer, I need to. This tells you the overall experience of rental with all of those scenarios tied into an experience understanding. And so you'll see that customer hands over membership card. What if they don't have it? I jump down to my extension that customer doesn't have a card. So this is what a use case typically looks like. Now, what's cool about having a requirements management tool is when I start typing, so I've already built my actors. When I start typing customer automatically pulls in because it's an actor. And now something you'll learn about later, traceability. Now I've connected this actor to this use case. I've connected this, this other use case. I can connect use cases to use cases. I can connect screenshots, screen mock-ups to use cases. I can do all of that. Now what's cool is you're going to learn about activity diagrams next weekend. When I write my use case, it can convert directly into a flow diagram, an activity diagram, or a swim lane diagram. Now the swim lane diagrams are usually a little bit messy and you have to clean them. And then you have basic requirements. We talked about the structure of business, functional, non-functional. Not everyone calls it that. It'd be better if we all got consistent, but that's okay. And we talked about process modeling, understand. We peeked at that, and here's an example of process modeling. Here's an example of a screen mock-up. This is when you're prototyping, and these are super easy because the structure, you just drag and drop it on there and it ties it to the data. We talked about ERDs. We talked about all of these things, right? You're going to learn next weekend. I'm not going to blow your mind, but you're going to learn about traceability next weekend. So check out this website. If you want to play around with doing business analysis with a tool that helps you structure that thinking, and maybe you're a kinesthetic learner, and for you to be able to absorb this stuff with IBA best practices, you really need to be able to play with something. Well, Visual Use Case has a subset of those capabilities. It doesn't have the business process modeling, but it does have screen mock-ups, use cases that convert to activity diagrams, requirements, stakeholders, all of that kind of stuff. You see here, use cases, actors, context diagrams. It has most of what you need, and it is free for a single project. Now, what that means is you could even at work, you could even create a project, do your documentation, export it to a Word report because it'll do that for you, and then start over with a new project because you can erase stuff. So you can do that, and here's a link to that. If you're a kinesthetic learner, playing with this is going to help you remember stuff, and you're going to do better, and it's going to be less stressful. You can still use things like Excel and Word and stuff like that in SharePoint. If you're in an office, if you're in an organization that only uses like Microsoft tools or spreadsheet tools or something, integrate it with some kind of document management repository, SharePoint, Box, OnBase, whatever, right? So that it has versioning, and ideally you have approval workflow. Things like Top Team and some of these other solutions do electronic requirements package approval workflows and stuff like that. Okay, do you guys have any questions before I set you free for the rest of your weekend so you can like numbly go through your day after I've inundated your brain with so much information?
I had a quick question.
Yes.
So, this particular question has come up in my mind because of the things that we covered today. So it might sound a little different, but my focus is the elicitation part and the communication part and all what we discussed today. So what advice would you have in the nutshell, in briefly, for somebody who's going to, let's say, move out of a certain organization within the same industry, but a different in the same vertical but a different business, like in financial services, but has moved from, let's say, um, lending and leasing, maybe say
Right.
asset management or things like that, or insurance.
Okay. And so you're looking for guidance on how do you help yourself transition, or how do you get them to consider you?
No, transition for as a BA, not for the stakeholders or anybody. Just looking onto oneself as a BA.
Okay. And so you're asking, can you pose your question, or what is your ask? Pose that to me again, please.
Okay. How would a BA transition
Okay.
within the same, let's say, within the financial services to different businesses?
Right.
Like
Okay.
from, let's say, lending, let's say from bank or like banking to
Banking to lending.
insurance or asset management.
Right. So it really doesn't, the way that you're going to transition is going to be the same as if you were to transition to even a different vertical. It's really not that much different. It's easier to transition within the same vertical, but into a different functional area of that vertical. But really what that means is to transition, be confident, believe in your skills as a business analyst, and recognize the value of objectivity. So having insecurity is going to be the first killer for your transition. You're going to go in uncomfortable. Believe in yourself, first of all, because the skills you have as an analyst are portable to any vertical, right? Any vertical you're going to be able to do, because it's all about curiosity, learning, right? You want to know just enough to ask good questions, but not so much that you predict answers or have biased assumptions that you design or elicit from. So you can get what you need for transitioning just by, if you're going from banking to lending, research mortgages, research short-term lending, just read about it some. Not so much that you can go execute that work, because now you've become a subject matter expert, but enough to build the right level of awareness so that when you come in, you can speak their language, right? Because trust, you need to know the lingo. Knowing the lingo is more important than being intimately familiar with all of the ins and outs of a specific industry. Knowing the lingo is going to help you communicate. You're going to feel like one of the team more quickly. They're going to trust you more quickly. And when they trust you, now, and be honest. Hey guys, I'm new to this vertical. I mean, as an analyst, the powerful change I represent for you is the fact that I'm going to help you be objective about finding the best solution going forward. And I'm going to have fewer assumptions. Now, what that means is you're going to sometimes feel like you've got a 2-year-old in front of you, because I'm going to ask why? Where'd that come from? Why'd that do that? Well, where'd that go? Right? And I make it fun and I make it funny, and I'm honest up front about what I do and don't know. So transitioning, honesty is important. And anyone that's going to poo-poo you because you don't know the details, then they don't understand what you do, and you can't let that get to you. You got to realize that they are feeling like, what? They're going to tell this person to tell me what I need to do, and they don't even know what I do. They're not more important than me. That's what's going on in their subconscious, even if they're not aware of it. Right? So I believe in being honest. Read up front what you can get your hands on. Don't expect yourself to be an expert. You should not be. And go for it. Just go for it. That's how you're going to learn.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You bet. Hey, I could be wrong, so I don't own it. Sorry.
I love you. All good.
I'm applying what I was teaching you guys. No, but yeah, I mean, but honestly, I don't know, what was it? I had someone tell me, I don't think you're scared of much. And I'm like, oh, I'm scared. I just don't let it control me. And I also am okay enough with who I am and what I do and where I come from and where I'm going that I realize I'm not perfect. But I know I'm kind of smart, So, I mean, I see it as an adventure. I think a lot of this has everything to do with how we choose to perceive what's in front of us and how we choose to respond to it. And so when I have an opportunity to move into an industry that I've never even touched, I am excited. I try not to be scared. And if I'm scared for a moment, I allow myself to feel that for a moment. And then I purposefully shift my perspective and see it as an opportunity to become an even better analyst. Because now I'm going to be able to bring those ideas from that other industry into a world that they've never seen the ideas the other one has, but they might apply. And now we have innovation. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a similar line of question, for us BCBA people that we don't have any experience with business analysis, do you have any suggestions on ways to get experience since we're not working in business analysis right now?
So one of the things that you can do, that tool that I just showed you, right? Download it.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, I have found myself in the past, I accepted an opportunity that was brought to me, and they were very insistent with it, but it turned out to not be what was mentioned, and it was probably my worst experience. I actually sometimes call those people evil. Sorry. I mean, I've had bad experiences, but this one was particularly horrific. And that was the only time since I was, 16, that I was without a job. So I wasn't working. And was it scary? Yes, because I'm the primary income earner and I have a family. But instead of being fearful, I chose to focus on, you know what I did? I chose, even if knowing that I might get a job in the next 1 to 8 weeks, who knows? I'm not going to assume that's going to be the case, and I'm going to build my own business. And so I, with my own download of Top Team, I started building out my requirements for the solutions I would need. I built out my own business plan, my own business case for the business. I started building all of that out. So what happened there was I started teaching myself all of the elements of understanding business, all of it, especially when I was building a business plan. And when I had to do that, now mind you, I was looking for contract work because I was really tired of feeling trapped and stuff. Anyway, I won't go into that. But so I had a plan to do contract work, and I wanted to build my own business and try to build that out. So I started researching a business plan, and I started dabbling in all of the things I've ever done as a business analyst and applied it to my own business using my requirements management tool. And that made me a better business analyst. And it actually worked. Started my own company, got my first contract, and that lended me so much self-confidence and faith that some of the fear I used to live under, where I was scared to be honest. I was honest, but the stress level of being honest. But that made me a better business analyst, and it allowed me the opportunity without having a job, but still with a purpose, because it's hard to stick with studying and it's hard to stick with, performing business analysis if you got to have something to do that on, right? And it's hard to just pretend. I'm not good at that. My mom used to tell me I sucked at being a kid because I was always analyzing everything. So I built my own business and did analysis on building my own business. That's how I kept my skills sharp. I got a contract within the first 3 or 4 weeks, but I didn't waste a minute. I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay.
I, of course, still need to start my own business to do this, but just come up with, are you suggesting maybe coming up with ideas for your own business and then try to perform business analysis on your own made-up business?
Yeah, because here's the thing. If you're trying to practice business analysis and you're not currently employed, you're going to have to pick something to do it on. Now, you could do it on your own challenges in your family, the challenges you have in life for self-improvement. You could do that too, because business analysis can be applied to almost anything. But what I did was, because I wasn't working and I really needed to work, the whole 2 birds, 1 stone thing, set up my own business, planned it out using business analysis, analyzed solution offerings that would help me do that effectively, built my own structure around the services I was offering. That's business analysis. And what that did for me was it let me practice it. But I practiced it in a form that, should I want to do that like full time and not allow someone to talk me into working for them, like I have done even recently, I have a business to fall back onto immediately because of my continuing to engage and execute business analysis, but for me instead of for someone else.
Yeah.
Totally
Thank
up to
you.
you, though. If you want to try to solve some of the problems that live in your immediate world, some of the problems with your friends, if you know what else you could do while you're not working, you know how many companies, especially nonprofits, are just struggling right now. You could always offer pro bono business analysis and do it for other companies, just as like a pro bono thing. Now, what I would recommend is you start your own business so that can be a write-off for you. Because
Right.
normally if you're doing that work, it's considered income opportunity. But if you're giving it for free to a nonprofit, that can be considered a form of charity, I believe. But you'd want to look into the details of that. And now you have a reference that's not you.
Thank you.
You bet. I bet there's some people out there that could use your help but can't afford it right now with this world. And if it keeps you working and you've got a reference, that's a pretty cool thing. Anything else?
This is Caleb. Would you mind going back to the BRD slide that feeds into the business analysis package? I missed some of that, and I can't find any material anywhere else.
Was that communicating BA information?
Yes.
Let's see.
You're talking about how it wraps up into the package,
Mm-hmm.
and they're able to pass that off to the product owner and some of the executive sponsors.
This? No?
No. It was after that.
Not that.
No, it was after that, I believe. Yeah. That's right in here.
Here it is.
Yes. Yeah. All right, perfect. I'm gonna get a quick screen capture of that.
And I will say, tell me when you're done. You have it?
Just a second. Sorry, my computer's lagging.
Okay.
So we have all these presentations in the feed, right?
Yeah, I'm about to show you that.
Just for my information. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did you get a chance to get it, Caleb?
Not yet, sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Terrible timing.
Tell me when you're going to do it, but I need to show you something. In session 2, it's not going to be as big of a picture, but it should be right here. Oh, that's awful. Sorry. Okay.
All right, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, you bet. Any other questions before we adjourn? Well, you guys have some stamina. You've been on the phone with me for almost 5 hours today and 4.5 yesterday. So good job. Excellent questions. I love that you guys engaged and asked questions. I'm excited for you. As I mentioned before, feel free to connect with me, but please be patient with me because it comes in waves. Sometimes I get a ton of inquiries and it can get a little bit overwhelming. That doesn't mean I'm not interested in responding. It just means that I'm distracted and my ADD is not dealing well with all of the bushy-tailed squirrels in the yard, and I might need your help focusing. So feel free to say, hey, just want your attention for a minute, and I'll do my best, okay? I wish you the best of luck. You're going to...
Okay.
Yes.
Laura, could you please share your podcast? I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay, so hold on, guys. Don't... So one of the ways that you can find it... let's see... I've got several. What's this one? Does he not list my podcasts there? No, hold on. That's a link to it.
I listen to Dave Stable sometimes. That's awesome.
Do you? Yes, he.
Yeah.
I promised him I would give him another. Well, that's not me. Sorry. Okay, here they are. These three. So I talk about where should BAs live, how to run an effective workshop, and making change fun.
Okay.
So I'll send this in here. Oh, no, not that.
So how do we access these? I mean, one, two, three.
Just click the link that I just sent that I put in the chat. Click that
Okay.
before the end of class.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and click the other links that I sent if you're curious about playing around with a requirements management tool built on what you're learning right now. You won't get access to everything, but there is a free tool that's pretty darn cool. So if you guys want to click any of those links, you're going to need to do it before you leave class. So I would
What I
access
did was I copied those and just emailed it myself,
Yep.
So I realized that they will be lost, so I did that. So if anybody else wants to do it, yeah.
We can drop that in the Discord as well.
You can bookmark there.
Let's see if these are still available. I don't know if they still have out there what I did for them. Yeah, okay. So this has 2 articles that might be helpful information for you. These are written in a way that they're meant to be directed at not you guys. You guys might find them helpful, but they're really great for communicating to leadership. What should I be helping you with change? So these argue the fact that you should be engaged early and upfront. And I actually changed this. I need to have them update that because it now has people, process, data, and technology all there. I should probably update this. But why should we do it? What efficiencies will we find? What value is there? How do we do it? Sample efforts, sample stuff. When should you engage? As early as possible. So
which article did you click on out of the 2? Or did you copy this?
This is the first one. This is part 1.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then there's also, I did part 2. Oh, and just so that you guys know, if you subscribe to their blog here, this is the company I currently work for, and they just recently asked me. We did a webinar on it on the first one, and we were going to do it on this one too. We just kind of got distracted with a lot of stuff, and just recently they've said, I need you to do a lot more of those. So I'll probably be doing more webinars and doing more blogging here, so you might find that information useful, so you can subscribe to that so you'll get notified. Now, unfortunately, you'll get notified of all of the articles that they do, but if you're in an environment that does stuff with artificial intelligence or data extraction and understanding or holistic change, then you're going to find value in a lot of their blogs. So there's that too. And you can always ping me, right? Oh, you know what would be really awesome? Is you guys, if there's something specific you would like to hear, like a webinar on, or see a blog or see a video on, send a message to me on LinkedIn and I'll add it to, because I'm looking for ideas on how I can help people kind of fill their time with the situation right now, especially people that are looking for new ways to think about things or looking for ways for self-improvement while they're kind of riding out this current crazy crap we're dealing with. Maybe having people like you guys inspire me and push me. I might do more videos of my own too. I don't know. So send me ideas of what you'd like to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? Any other thoughts before we close? I wish you guys the best. All the best of luck. LN is a very, very knowledgeable individual, and he's going to be. I'm great for helping you understand this stuff, like in a real world context, get the theory in your head, tell you a lot of stories, but he is the expert on the test. So he will be an amazing resource for you, and he takes care of you. Usually he comes in on the third weekend, and the first weekend is Peter, and the second weekend is me, but with this crazy stuff going on, we had to shift it up. So you're going to have him from now on, but you will definitely have access to him to make sure that you are comfortable for your test. So, I mean, you have access to me too with LinkedIn and stuff, but you're going to have a lot of direct interaction with the testing expert. So you're going to be good to go. You're in good hands. Wish you guys the best. Stay safe, please. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, so happy to
Happy Easter, everybody. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
You bet. You guys have a question on the CBAP people, if anyone's still here to respond to Anaga.
No, I don't think anybody has. There are only 3.
Mm-hmm. You know what you might do is if no one has yet. Oh, Caleb says yes in Discord.
Caleb. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Caleb.
Caleb, my.
You guys might connect on LinkedIn too, so you can communicate with each other easily.
Yeah. It's just.
There's the link.
Okay, there's a link. Okay, I need. Okay. Okay.
Anaga, did you get that? Okay, excellent. Okay. Okay. I'm going to wait in case you guys need to chat anymore. I'll wait until you guys all leave, and then I'll close out to make sure that I'm not cutting off anyone when they're chatting.
Yeah, Vortex, he set up for all 3 study groups. For
Okay.
CBA, CCBA, and CBAP
Excellent.
in the Discord. I don't know if there's anywhere else we can put this link.
So, is the same link or are there 2 groups now?
It should be the same link. Get you into the Discord, and then there are sections from there.
I wonder.
You also have it broken out by knowledge area. Channels based on knowledge area.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't think all of you are. No, you guys aren't all. I have all of your emails in here, but I don't want to break any rules by emailing you guys.
Is there any forum or anything on Adaptive that can drop it?
You know what? I don't get to look at it from a student's perspective, so I'm not confident on the capabilities from a student perspective. LN is very familiar with that platform. He helped build it. So he would be a better person to ask. So I would say as you guys are engaging each other and kind of getting set up on Discord, you're going to be a lot more prepared to do study group after next weekend anyway. After you've been exposed high level to everything, you're going to do a lot better as a study group together after that. So maybe next weekend, one of you brings that up and says, hey, has everyone been able to get settled into our study group on Discord? And make sure that it's shared at that time. Just for the stragglers because 10 of you have already dropped off. I only have 9 left on the phone.
Yeah, so I joined the group. I see Anaga, Bartek, Monica. Yeah, so okay.
Because you only have 7 members and we've got 19 people in the class, so I'm not sure that everyone's aware.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good day, guys.
Thanks
Wish you
a
the
lot.
best. Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
You bet.
Thank you.